Comparison of disease and health standards between the Philippines and the US. The Philippines is a developing country that's made up of islands off of the coast of China, Malaysia, and Indonesia, as you can see in the map. They have a population of over 100 million with quite a high population density of about 330 people per square kilometer of land area. It's interesting to look at these two numbers compared to the US. The US is a developed country. We have 3 times as high of a population at over 300 million, but our population density is only a tenth of what it is in the Philippines. So basically, the Philippines has very little land that is supporting quite a number of people that need it to be able to survive. Water management in the Philippines. The Philippine Clean Water Act of 2004, or Republic Act number 9275, aims to protect the country's water bodies from pollution from land-based sources. There are studies that point to the fact that domestic wastewater is the principal cause of organic pollution at approximately 48% of the Philippines' water bodies. For water management of wastewater in the Philippines, the Department of Health formulates the guidelines and standards for the collection, treatment, and disposal of sewage, as well as the guidelines for the establishment and operation of centralized sewage treatment. Drinking water management is based on the watershed river basin or water resource region, and the water quality management areas are also to be designated by the DENR in coordination with the National Water Resources Board in the Philippines. Water management in the United States is regulated by the EPA, and the EPA enforces requirements under the Clean Water Act for waste management and the Safe Drinking Water Act for drinking water. Wastewater management is under the Clean Water Act's National Pollutant Discharge Elimination Program. And this Clean Water Action Plan targets enforcements to the most important water pollution problems, which include concentrated animal feeding operations, sewer overflows, contaminated water that flows from industrial facilities, construction sites, and runoff from urban streets. For water management of drinking water in the U.S., the EPA safeguards human health by enforcing the requirements of the SDWA to ensure that our public drinking water supply and its sources are protected. The EPA also ensures that our public drinking water systems comply with health-based federal standards for contaminants, which include performing regular monitoring and reporting. The law that talks about solid waste management in the Philippines is called the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, or RA 9003. This act provides for a comprehensive ecological solid waste management program by creating the necessary institutional mechanisms and incentives, appropriating funds, and declaring certain acts prohibited and providing penalties, and to prevent people from not properly disposing of waste. In the U.S., our law that we use is the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, which is abbreviated as RCRA. It's our nation's primary law governing the disposal of solid and hazardous waste. The goals of the RCRA include protecting human health and the environment from potential hazards of waste disposal, conserving energy and natural resources, reducing the amount of waste generated, and ensuring that waste are managed in an environmentally sound manner. In the corner is a little chart showing what our total waste in the U.S. are made of. You'll see a lot of the items are things that can be recycled, like paper and cardboard, plastics, things like that, and there's also quite a bit that can be used for compost, including food waste and yard trimmings. For solid waste management in the Philippines, the waste mismanagement has serious environmental effects in the Philippines, making the passage of RA 9003 a landmark environmental legislation in the Philippines. Their solid waste management kind of follows the same guidelines as the U.S. They have waste characterization and segregation, source reduction, collection and transport of solid waste. They have a recycling program and composting. For solid waste management in the U.S., we have a few different ways to handle and store waste. We have landfills, which are engineered areas where waste is placed into the land. And then we have energy recovery from waste, which is the conversion of non-recyclable waste materials into usable heat, electricity, or fuel. For vaccinations in the Philippines, the government of the Philippines has allocated budget for the immunization of the more vulnerable population, including infants, children, women, and older persons. This is a great leap towards universal access to quality vaccines for prevention of the most vaccine preventable diseases. In the U.S., we have the ACIP, or the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, and they recommend vaccine schedules for children, adolescents, and adults, and their decisions are based on scientific evidence and the benefits of preventing infectious diseases. School children are generally required to have all of the needed immunizations before they're able to attend school in the U.S. Henipavirus infection is an infection that has occurred in the Philippines most recently in 2014, and the fatality rates among humans are very high. It's thought that it's contracted from horse to human and then human to human transmission, and most likely the source of infection for the horses was from fruit bats. Dengue fever is another infectious disease that's common in the Philippines compared to the U.S. It's a painful and debilitating mosquito-borne disease that's caused by the bite of an Aedes mosquito that is infected with dengue fever. It can't be spread from one person to another person, but if you're bitten by a mosquito that has it, you will get infected with it. Leptospirosis is a bacteria that's spread through the urine of infected animals, which can then get into water or soil, and it can survive for several weeks to months. Person-to-person transmission is also rare, and generally outbreaks are caused by exposure to contaminated water, such as floodwaters. Rabies is a deadly disease caused by a virus that is spread in the saliva of infected animals, and you can get it if you're licked, bitten, or scratched from an animal that is already infected with rabies. Rabies affects the central nervous system, ultimately causing brain disease and death, and the disease is always nearly fatal. So prevention is especially important, and there are vaccinations available. This disease occurs both in the U.S. and the Philippines. Hepatitis A is a liver disease that results from infection with the hepatitis A virus. It's usually spread when a person ingests fecal matter from contact with objects, food, or drinks contaminated by the feces or stool of an infected person. The best way to prevent this disease is by getting vaccinated, and this disease occurs both in the U.S. and in the Philippines. I wanted to include this slide of the Millennium Development Goals because they list out 8 guidelines for countries to work on to eradicate issues to help promote better health in their countries and globally. The goals include eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, achieving universal primary education, promoting gender equality and empowering women, reducing child mortality, improving maternal health, combating HIV, AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability, and develop a global partnership for development. In conclusion, overpopulation and crowding without enough resources to adequately serve the people are major problems for the Philippines. However, the Philippines does have an outline for growing and evolving from a developing country into a developed country, and they are participating in the Millennium Development Goals. This is the list of citations that I use for my project.